Welcome to the training on score report consultations. This is a very important training for many reasons, primarily because a lot of the leads that you'll be generating and the customers that you'll be talking to are going to have score reports. They'll either take a practice exam with us or they can have a score report from an official exam. So it really depends, but either way, we really need to understand how to leverage score report consultations with our families in order to produce amazing results. Now, you may be asking yourself, why are there birds on the screen? And I want to give everyone just a second out there, watching, to think about what kind of bird this is. And it's really funny because in a lot of our trainings, we have everyone, of course, come out to the Santa Monica office. And often there are East Coasters, and many of them don't know what this bird is. And of course, me growing up here in California, both Northern California and Southern California, I understand what this bird is. And it is, of course, if you knew it, when I gave you the time to think about it, it is a pelican. And the interesting thing about this bird, and this isn't a complete tangent, by the way, so keep your focus, is that if you watch a pelican, if I'm out in the water here body surfing, or if you're surfing, and you see them skim the water and skim the surface, and then they drop down. And it's not like you're sitting out there in the water, just kind of wading through the water and going, oh, wow, yep, they've been down there for 20 minutes. Oh, it's been 30 minutes. It doesn't happen like that. The pelican drops down into the water and comes back up very quickly with its food. So that's how I want us to think about score report consultations. We've had a lot of problems with advisors in the past, really digging super deep with families, and it ends up confusing them, and it ends up not keeping it simple for them. And often then the parents will want to get off the phone and will be kind of frozen by that process. However, if you do a score report consultation, much in the vein of something like a pelican, you understand that you can skim the surface, you go down, that's where you're adding value, and you come back up. You never want to get too far in the weeds with a family. It's a lot like my father, who's been in sales for a long time, told me when I was selling insurance, regrettably, because I didn't want to be a chip off the old block, but I ended up being that way for a number of years. He said, when you sell insurance, the last thing you want to do is teach the other person how to sell insurance. And I think what he meant by that primarily is, if you try to explain everything about insurance to that person, they're just going to ask endless questions and the wheels will be spinning and you'll have a very hard time making a sale. So I hope this guiding concept for a score report consultation is clear as we progress. So why do a score report consultation? We're going to leverage expertise. So what are the essential whys here? Well, number one, it allows us to demonstrate expertise. And the burden of proof for that is very low, by the way. We don't have to be super complicated. Again, we can skim the surface. We're going to know more than 95% of the parents that call in. And even if a parent knows a lot, they probably don't know more than the advisor, unless they're an independent college counselor or something crazy like that. It's going to be a very, very small, minuscule amount of the parents you deal with. So the burden of proof is low. You say a couple of things and they will say, wow, this person's a guru. They trust you. So it allows us to demonstrate expertise. It is a talking point. It is there for that reason. And we build value. So while we demonstrate expertise, we also show ways that we can help. And that lends itself to the second essential why, which is it allows us to expand the conversation into academics and recommend complete programs. So as you're going to learn or may already know, academics is an extraordinarily important part of the college admissions criteria. GPA is 50% of that decision when admissions counselors are looking at profiles. So it's extraordinarily important, and we can use the score report wisely to demonstrate our expertise and to show that this student has areas of opportunity in subjects that they could be working on in their academic classes. And we need to inform the parent of that and not just try to get them into test preparation, but try to help them and expand the conversation into a full, comprehensive, and complete program. Now, most importantly, it gives us the opportunity to discuss the uniqueness of Revolution's programs with parents. It allows us to tell them how unique our private one-on-one instruction is, our professional instructors, all the quality and the care and the work we've put in to having amazing programs for families. This is what the score report allows us to do. These are the essential whys. So how do we demonstrate value? You see here on the left-hand side, a ton of people can look at the score report and understand how a student did, but only a select group, you, the academic advisor, can analyze the score report, have insight, and develop an individualized action plan and recommend a professional instructor. So that helps us demonstrate a lot of value because we don't want to just see the obvious. I see that Alexandra scored a 1030. Well, any parent, any person that can see that it's competent enough to look at the score report and say, wow, their total was a 1030. Parents want insight. They want to understand what that means. And now again, we don't have to go extraordinarily in depth into that discussion, but we can explain it in simple ways, digestible ways. Let me give an example of this. Not deep enough, of course, would be Alexandra scored a 520 on the math section and missed a large number of questions. We'll definitely need to shore up this section. That's an example of an advisor not going deep enough. Too deep, on the other hand, would be Alexandra missed questions 11 and 12 on the math section. Those are linear equation questions. Here at Revolution, we recommend a strategy, ISME, that really helps with math. Now let's talk about questions 14 through 18. We're getting way too granular in that discussion. We want to avoid going into specific questions and what types of concepts there are, unless we're speaking about it in a broad stroked general sense. Just right would be this score report reveals a couple of definite opportunities for Alexandra in math. She missed a cluster of questions in the middle, which could indicate a mindset challenge or a struggle with test fluency. And she missed a lot of questions towards the end. And so really what that tells me is the questions are more rigorous there. The test goes from easy to more difficult. And so she's either running out of time or doesn't understand what's on it, or really just doesn't have a grasp on the rigorous concepts at the end. Our professional tutors are trained in developing these types of growth mindset in students and also helping to build concept mastery and test fluency. That is an example of right at the end plugging the program and making sure they know about the uniqueness of Revolution's programs, but also keeping it fairly simple, digestible, and understandable in terms of the expertise you demonstrate and the value you add for that parent. Because they do, after all, want to be educated about the test. Overeducated, however, is going to be confusing. So I'm glad I have the opportunity to drive that point home, and I'm always available for further questions if you have any. Reconnaissance phase of the consultation. What you want to do is not just add value or demonstrate your own expertise. You want to find out more about this student. And a really simple question that opens up large discussions and gives you a lot of information about the student is going to be, how has X done in math over the years? What math class is X in now? The test is cumulative, so it's important we're not missing any of the foundations. You're going to learn that the math section is a section that most people, most students struggle with. Most parents want more information on it, and they're going to say, oh, Johnny's not a math person, or Johnny doesn't like his math teacher, or Johnny hasn't done well in math over the years. And you could say, wow, the test is cumulative. I'm concerned about that. I want to make sure we go back and get the concept mastery. But of course, we have to ask this question. And you'd be surprised at a lot of advisors, when they get to the math section, they neglect to ask how the student has done in math over the years. This is the math trajectory. This is the advanced math trajectory. So let me explain. In 8th grade, if you're advanced, you take Algebra 1, and 9th, geometry. 10th is going to be Algebra 2, trig. 11th grade is going to be trig, pre-calc. And then 12th grade, it's going to be one of many possibilities: calculus, A, B, B, C, stats, those types of class, AP statistics. Now, if you're on the regular track in 9th grade, you're going to take Algebra 1. In 10th grade, you're going to take geometry. In 11th grade, you're going to take Algebra 2 trig. So what does this say? That most students that are on the normal track, and if they struggle in math, they're not even going to have seen all the Algebra 2 that's on the exam by their junior year. So we want to not only remediate and shore up the foundations, but we also want to help them understand what's going to actually be on the test and build their confidence. Adding value on the math, some talking points. The good thing about math is it's typically the easiest and fastest section to increase. And it's really a combination of three things, the results. It's going to be overall math competence because, of course, it's cumulative. So most students typically have gaps of 25%. This is important for lower to average performers. Also, attention to detail. Our core process that our professional tutors use is ISME. It is a great process that we use: identify, set up, make sure, and execute. It really gives a student confidence to know how to approach math questions, and it's a great tool for them to have in their tool belts. Test fluency is the most important for high performers. It's not going to be about concept mastery. If they're getting A's in all their math classes, they understand the concepts. Now it's just a matter of getting them up to fluency, and it's kind of explained like a language. Let's pretend a student knows all the concepts, all of the Spanish verbs, all the ways to conjugate those Spanish verbs, all the ways to put together sentences in Spanish. But then you drop them into Spain. Well, they might not be able to just drop into Spain and be fluent. It's the same thing. A student may get all A's in their classes and know all the concepts, but then at the end of the day, you drop them in the testing environment and they don't have that test fluency because they don't understand what's on it or they don't know how to execute. Our instructors work with both kinds of needs and can answer those needs with solid work and development. Test zone issues, of course, is going to be endurance. Most students haven't had a 4-hour exam. Just things like that, ways to understand how to focus, how to keep your academic intensity. On the reconnaissance phase, you want to ask about reading and writing. Does your student read for leisure? And how have they done with reading for history class, English, etc.? And do they have a firm grasp on the nuts and bolts of English language? Because a lot of students are going to have English as their mother tongue, and they will rely on their grammar ear, and the test takers know that. So they will intentionally put questions on there that are not called wrong answers. The test makers call these answers distractors. So let's keep that in mind. This is the reconnaissance phase of reading and writing. How do you add value there? Well, the reading sections are typically the longest sections. It takes the longest for students to increase their scores. The good news is that as a student develops this skill, it makes studying for classes easier. It makes high school all history, science, even math that has more critical reading in it nowadays with the Common Core. It makes it much easier. And we found that after working with our tutors and having students increase their critical reading scores, they do take much less time in reading for those core academic subjects. And also, we want to ask, if they do read for leisure, is it nonfiction? We really need to get a student reading more nonfiction. There's a lot of research that shows that students in middle and high school are not doing enough reading of nonfiction. So it's pretty rare that when a student hits the test or even the real world, that someone's going to hand them a Shakespeare sonnet and say, interpret this for me. So this is a skill that transcends the SAT and or ACT. So adding value writing. Well, if a student doesn't read for leisure, it's hard for them to recognize style problems like wordiness or to have a firm handle on semicolon usage. And remember, we don't want them to rely on the grammar ear and they need to understand the rules, the nuts and bolts of language. And also, we want them to be able to identify, remember ISME, the concept being tested. With preparation, we know all the grammar concepts are going to be tested. They're easily identifiable, and that really eases a student's mind because they can understand what's going to be on the test. And of course, grammar, style, and tone are the foundations for communication. These skills, test prep skills, are skills that help you in high school, in college, for college readiness and competitiveness, and also in life in general. So that builds out a lot of value for a parent when you tell them that. They don't just see it as point grabbing on one of these tests. Now, adding value for science. The easiest way is a lot of people think that they have to study cellular development or hardcore science concepts. The science section is always basically a reading section. It's really about the student's ability to interpret graphs and charts. And typically there's only one question that's very basic in the entire science section that requires you to bring outside science knowledge. But this section is really weird for most students because it trips them out with all the scientific concepts. So it's really one of those sections that you can pick up a lot of points, but you have to understand it and you have to be able to work with someone who can teach it properly. I always tell a story. So I tell a story about a student, Jake, who worked for a year, and he went from a 25 to a 32 and ended up getting into UC Berkeley. It was a school he would have never been able to get into without that kind of a score. And his mother, Carolyn, thought that it wouldn't really be possible. And so it wasn't even an option. But he put in the time, he put in the effort, and he worked with a professional instructor to make it happen. I tell these types of stories, and I, of course, adapt them to certain scenarios and situations. We always want to be telling stories about the students we've helped. It helps parents digest what we're talking about, and it really contextualizes it and paints a picture and makes it real. So you can borrow stories, success stories from other advisors, from the company, and eventually you'll have a lot of your own success stories. But share them on nearly every call when appropriate. And last but not least, you want to end the score report consultation with a strong recommendation that is clear and distinct. You'd be surprised how many advisors add a lot of value, demonstrate expertise, come up with an individualized type of plan, but don't actually clearly make that recommendation to a parent. And an example of this would be, according to our 15 years of experience and what I've seen with the math section, everything we've discussed, and the timing and the test fluency, Johnny should do 25 hours with a professional instructor, etc. So we want to make sure our recommendations come and are clear and parents understand them. So that is all right now for a score report consultation. There's always ongoing training, but this is enough to digest, and I'll see you all soon.